So on the class syllabus, it says that you will be completing an IPA lesson, integrated performance assessment lesson steps. You're not actually gonna put the lesson, you're not gonna present the lesson. We're only gonna work on the lesson steps, okay? And for tonight, let's go ahead and work on steps one through step three. Okay. If we have enough time today, we'll take a look at lessons, steps one, two, and three. Very simple, simple steps. So we can all do it in one, in the same topic. That's going to be the goal, to have everybody's going to end up with the same lesson, same topic. That way, we can have a better idea of how to put these lessons together. And then later on, you can reproduce another lesson in a different topic. But now that you have a better idea how to put it together. All right. So this assignment will not be turning until, I believe it's the first week or second week of December. It's in the Google Classroom. So just go ahead and take a look at the due date. Then hopefully by then we're going to be all completed. Also, you'll be in charge of reading the last chapter of our textbook, The Keys to Assessing Language Proficiency, Chapter 6. Complete your reading summary, which will be the last reading summary of the semester as well. So have that ready by Monday. Okay. Other than that, make sure to prepare your final presentation for Wednesdays. Those of you who are presenting on Wednesday, and I noticed that for Wednesday we need to complete step 4. So after presentations, we're going to have 3 presentations. Hopefully, we have enough time to work on that step 4 for the IPA lesson. All right. And it looks like that's going to be it for the week. After this week, we will be going to Thanksgiving break. And I'm noticing that this year, Fresno State is giving students the entire week off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what I've seen in the academic calendar. I'll just double check just in case. You can always click on that link that I have there for the calendar. But I do believe that Fresno State now is giving the entire week off for Thanksgiving break. Let me just check. Yep, Monday through Friday, November 25th to the 29th. It was not the case. They will only give you um, Wednesday through Friday, right? So we still had class on Monday, but it looks like you will be getting the entire week off. So it's a good time to catch up on any of the assignments that you have for any of your classes. Now, somebody asked if I could repeat the steps for um, for the IPA lesson. We will be working on steps 1 through 3, step 3 all the way to 3 tonight, and step 4 on Wednesday. The ideal will be to work on these steps together. All right, but we're gonna have to play it by ear. This document, it's posted in the Google Classroom as an IPA lesson, Integrated Performance Assessment lesson. Okay, so we'll review it at the end of today's session, so you can take a look at it. Very simple to begin with. Then it gets a little more complicated, but not very much. Not something that you cannot do on your own. Okay. Any questions, comments at this point before we begin? All right. Today we are going back to chapter 4 reading you did last week on rubric signing to assess performance. So that's going to be the tough today, and the quiz at the end of the class will be on the information that we are today. Okay. So let me go ahead and switch gears over here to today's lesson. Oh, it's not changing what's happening here. Let me just try that one more time. Okay, there we go. All right. So chapter 4, it's gonna teach us how to design a performance assessment rubric. Right? We're been using rubrics. You have been using rubrics for your presentations, and we have been using rubrics for our very own assessments in the class as well. So before we begin, let's go ahead and work on some definitions so we can all be on the same understanding in regards to different definitions. All right. So first of all, we need to define assessment. Assessment is the means through which students' performances will be elicited. Let me repeat that one more time. Assessment is the means through which students' performances will be elicited. All right, this could be through a unit test, this could be through a presentation, this could be through a writing, different ways where students will elicit their performances. Okay. Another definition that we need to keep in mind. All right, and remember that this could be done in the three modes of communication. It could be a presentational mode, could be an interpreted mode, or it could be an interpersonal mode of communication. All right. Our next definition will be evaluation. Evaluation is the process by which teacher judge the excellence of that performance. One more time, is the process by which the teacher judges the excellence of that performance. That will be an evaluation. And for this, we would use a rubric. All right. One more definition, and that would be grading. Grading is the percentage to generate a single rating meant to summarize achievement over a period of time. This could be a quarter or a grade or a semester's grade. Okay, so as you already know, we're about to end up the semester. So that will be your grade will be a percentage that will summarize your achievement in the course. All right, so grading the percentages to generate a single rating meant to summarize achievement over a period of time. And this could be through a quarter or through a semester. All right. Okay. So now let's start talking about traditional assessments. What we know of how to assess students' work traditionally. Often the evaluation tool rates students based on elements that are not part of language proficiency. So most of the assessments that we do have in place in the class sometimes do not evaluate language proficiency. Sometimes we make a lot of emphasis on creativity, which has nothing to do with language proficiency, right? Sometimes we evaluate on handwriting, which has nothing to do with language proficiency. Or maybe we're looking at the students' presentations that are entertaining and that are funny, nothing to do with language proficiency. So we need to be careful on how we select our assessment tools, and we need to make sure that whatever we decide on using measures language proficiency. Okay, so that's a biggie. For example, I remember one time my daughter was taking a Spanish class at a community college, and she got some points deducted because her handwriting was too small. Um, so I questioned that and said, "But what do that has to do with language proficiency?" Nothing to do with language proficiency. And of course, the course probably was not focusing on language proficiency. The course was focusing on something else because by deducting points because the handwriting was too small, it didn't make any sense, right? So we need to be very careful with what we measure and how we communicate that to students as well. Okay. Again, traditional assessments are letter grades, right? Sometimes we provide our students with an F, with a D, a C, a B, an A, maybe a C minus, B minus, B plus, and we provide these letters, these grades, but many times they do not have a meaning for our students. They mean nothing. Why? Because our the ratings grades in themselves do not help students identify their strengths and their weaknesses of their performance in order for them to improve. So just by saying this is an A or this is you got a B, it gives them no feedback as far as what they need to improve on. Okay, so keep that in mind. A single grade, letter grade, is not going to help our students improve in their language proficiency. And that's what traditionally we do. We give them a single letter grade with no other explanation, right? Um, for that reason, teachers, we need to carefully craft the evaluation instruments that we use to rate what it really matters, which in this case is language proficiency. We want our students to focus on what language proficiency is and to improve on that rather than getting some distractions like color in their presentations, humor in their presentations. I mean, we all love that to have those very fun presentations by students, but it's not really what it be measured, right? Okay, so for that matter, we use rubrics to improve performance, right? Rubrics provide feedback based on a criteria to improve their performance, the students' performance. Rubrics are a set of criteria that describe the expectations to evaluate students' performance. Rubrics usually have three levels of quality, and those are exceeding expectations, meeting expectations, and does not meet expectations, right? What we have been using all along, something that is simple but clear to the students. Well crafted rubrics describe the expected performance in words that are clear to students. We don't want to use very fancy words that the students are not going to understand. And if we do, because it's recommended to use academic language, right, with students, we need to make sure that they do understand what the meaning of that word or of that expectation is. We need to make sure that our students understand the rubric, right? So they can perform accordingly. So rubrics, it's a good tool to assess our students' performance. So one thing that we need to know is that rubrics are not effective all the time. Okay, sometimes a quick learning quiz, right? A quick formative assessment will be enough, especially when we talk about grammar, for example, right? Our students are learning a grammatical point. It'll be best to have just a quiz based on that particular point rather than trying to assess grammar in the entirety of the unit, for example. It becomes very overwhelming for you, the person who is assessing, and the student who's trying to demonstrate their understanding of grammar or of a grammar concept. So again, it will depend on the type of assessment that you're doing, whether to use a rubric or whether to use just a simple, quick learning check, like a quiz, for example, right? Um, because we need to remember that performing tasks uh, take time to administer and to evaluate, right? So using a rubric all the time will take a lot of your time sometimes and is not necessary every single time. So we need to select when to use a rubric and when to just do a quick learning check, like a quiz, for example. All right. So for that matter, we need to match the feedback tool to the type of assessment that we want to do. Remember, formative assessments may not require a rubric, a quick quiz, a quick check on how your students are doing while they're rehearsing the language. That's probably good enough, right? Now, summative assessments, on the other hand, where the work is more complex, it is probably recommended to have a rubric handy. So the feedback that you will provide your students, it's more extensive. You can give them a little more detailed feedback, right? For them to know what their strengths were and what their weaknesses were so they can improve upon that feedback. All right. Remember that the feedback needs to match the language level. Our expectations need our expectations need to match their ability at the current language performance, right? Novice low and mid perform to only complete the task, right? So we cannot expect from them more than what they're supposed to be able to do at that uh, performance level. All right. Rubrics help students know what is expected of them on the summative assessment at the end of the unit. During the practice, students evaluate each other using single elements of the rubric. So that way students know exactly what to expect of the summative assessment, right? The unit presentation, the unit test. On the assessment, students will be familiarized with the criteria if we follow this suggestion, right? Kind of break your rubric into pieces and have the students assess their own work using single elements of the rubric. So at the end of the unit, hopefully they went through all the elements and they are familiarized with the expectations of the rubric for the summative assessment for the unit test or unit presentation. Okay. Any questions, comments at this point? All right. So let's talk about 6 easy steps to design a performance assessment rubric. Step one, identify what makes quality performance. Identify the appropriate criteria for your rubric. Okay, criteria that make for effective communication is in the specific mode of communication. If your end product at the end of the unit is going to be a presentation, an oral presentation, make sure that the rubric is spelling that out for the students and letting them know what the criteria is going to be, what are the elements that they're going to be assessed on the rubric. If the end product assessment is going to be an interpersonal presentation or conversation, make sure that the rubric, it states that, and it states the specific elements that you will be looking at for the students to showcase their ability in that mode of communication. All right. Five makes performance or the mode of communication are going to be showcasing their knowledge. The instrument used for the evaluation needed the communicative purpose. Remember, at the end of the day, our assessment needs to assess communication, the communicative purpose. Okay, we're not assessing how much they can remember in conjugating a verb or how many words of the vocabulary they're able to remember. That's not what we're assessing. We are assessing communication, how well they can communicate, right? Focus on characteristics of use of the language, depending on the mode of communication that you are assessing, right? For example, if you are assessing the interpersonal mode of communication, focus that they are able to respond on the spot, have that spontaneous conversation, that students are able to negotiate meaning when they're running out of vocabulary. They're able to still communicate. They're able to carry on with the conversation even when they don't have the vocabulary, right? They're able to get that information that the other student has and that they need. So those are the things that we need to focus on in this mode of communication, right? Our main priority is to assess communication. Okay. So let's take a look at the different characteristics of each mode of communication. So for the interpersonal communication, if that's going to be our product assessment, right? If at the unit we want to assess our students, their ability to carry on a conversation, we need to know that they're able to negotiate meaning, as I mentioned, that they're able to use different strategies when they are lacking comprehension or they are running out of language, right? That that they're able to ask for clarifications in case they get stuck, right? That negotiation of meaning, and that they're able to sustain that conversation. That they're just not going to run out of vocabulary or out of ideas. So that's what we want to assess in this particular mode of communication. So now, if we want to assess the interpretive mode of communication, then we need to be able to assess their level of understanding in something that was read, that was listened to, or that was viewed. Their ability to provide a summary, and they're able to use context clues and many other different strategies to help comprehension. That's what we want to assess, not necessarily how many words they can memorize or remember. Okay. Now, on the presentational mode of communication, we want to assess for accuracy of vocabulary and structure. Since this mode of communication allows students to edit their work and rehearse their work, so the bar is a bit higher in terms of the errors that they will be making, right? Not that they're not going to make mistakes. Yes, expect mistakes in their presentations, but the errors should be less because they're able to um, rehearse or to edit their work, right? Their organization flow is their writing flowing from one thing to the other, right? Maybe do they have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion, right? The impact on the audience, are they getting the audience attention or not? And the use of clear and supportive examples that they're providing. So those are the things that we want to measure when students are presenting, not necessarily the quantity of vocabulary that they're able to produce. Okay, we're focusing more on the quality of vocabulary. All right, questions? All right. So one thing we need to keep in mind is that too many elements on the rubric makes it difficult to use and to administer. Too many elements is difficult are difficult for the students to keep track of everything that is expected of them, right? But for you, the teacher, it's too difficult to even grade with that rubric because you're not going to be able to keep up with every single thing. So at the end of the day, it reduces the meaning of the rubric to the students. It becomes obsolete, right? They pay very little attention to what really needs to be presented during that particular assessment. So I would say the less elements, the better. All right. Now, we need to be also careful of the idea of non negotiables, right? We want to internalize the idea that looking good or playing it safe during a presentation or during an assessment is not going to lead to improved proficiency. We need to encourage our students to sometimes take risks. Okay, sometimes don't just do the very basic, the very minimum. I usually tell my students when they are doing an interpersonal task, when they're doing a recording, I say you have 20 seconds of your time when it's your time to participate in this conversation. Don't just answer and ask what it's on the outline, right? Make sure that you're filling out those 20 seconds with language, because sometimes they're very quickly to answer whatever the question was from the recording and ask whatever question was on the outline, and then they have, I don't know, 5 seconds, 7 seconds left. I said don't leave any empty empty seconds. Make sure you're filling it up with language, right? So that's what we want to encourage our students to do, to take risks. Preparation items for the performance task should not go into the rubric. Okay, again, color, um, that it's the props, the what else goes into the preparation of a presentation, um, maybe the voices that they could make, humor, if we want them to use humor, if we want them to be very lively. Well, the idea is to be engaged and really get into the character. I agree, but that should not be an element of assessment, because that it does not lead to improved proficiency. We're not looking for a lot of color, and I mean it's nice to have those presentations, right? So we can post them on our wall, but it's not what we should focus on, right? What we need to focus on again is on um, communication, language proficiency. All right, moving on. Make it simple. Remove what is not needed in describing the quality performance. Make your descriptions in the criteria of your rubric simple so students can understand it, can remember it, right? We don't want vocabulary that's going to be too confusing for the students, because you know what they do? You tell them, take a look at the rubric, and they'll just browse through it. Boom. That's it. They won't look at it again, right? That's why it is important to review the rubric with them, to maybe cut the rubric into sections and have an assignment, do the assignment, have them grade themselves using that portion of the rubric so they can get familiarized with the rubric. And the more you use it, the more they're going to get familiarized. Hopefully, after different assessments, they'll know what the expectation is. It's about repetition and consistency. All right. All right. Step two, evaluate quality against the characteristics of target level of proficiency. Now, remember that we should evaluate students' performance based on targeted level of proficiency, right? We need to know and we need to be well aware what a novice student should be able to do, what an intermediate student should be able to do, and so on and so forth. So that way, our expectation is accordingly to that uh, targeted level of proficiency. Other than that, we are going to get frustrated because we're not seeing much improvement in our students. And our students are going to get frustrated as well because they're going to think that they are not making improvement, when in reality, they probably are. Okay? Uh, Vocabulary and grammar, again, can be evaluated more in detail in formative assessments. It is suggested to do it that way. So when they do a overall units assessment, you don't have to be too worried about whether they are using correct form of the verb, which it matters, but now you have already ruled that out in a formative assessment. Okay. Now remember that the actual performance guidelines present proficiency targets that help set realistic expectations to evaluate quality performance at each level. So you can always visit ACTFul for the proficiency levels. I would have something like this image close to my desk if as I'm preparing an assessment, preparing a rubric, so I can remind myself what a novice low, novice mid, novice high should be able to do, right? What an intermediate low, intermediate mid, intermediate high should be able to do. That way, I can match those expectations in my rubric. Okay, and this information can also be found in the California World Language Standards as well. All right. Step three, describe the performance that meets your expectations with the detail and clarity that will focus your instruction and students' learning. Rubrics criteria needs to be clear to students while focusing on what they need to work on to improve their performance. Again, If clear to the students, they'll know what your expectations are, and they'll know how to improve once you provide that feedback. But if it's not clear, if it's vocabulary they don't understand, it's too much, too much explanation on the criteria, they're just not gonna bother, right? It is crucial to identify how specific the feedback must be in order to be useful for teachers and students, right? So, what are the focus of this presentation that we want to provide feedback on to students, right? We need to be very specific so we can help students grow once we provide that feedback. Effective rubrics assess real language student performance. Let me repeat that one more time. Effective rubrics assess real language student performance. Very important. Again, we're not assessing her spelling words, we're assessing how well they can communicate with others in the three modes of communication, right? In real world scenarios. That's ultimately the goal. Now, when it's to, right, there are two types of rubrics that we can create. We can create the holistic rubric and the analytic rubric. Now, both of them have advantages and they also have disadvantages. The advantages of a holistic rubric is that all criterion evaluated simultaneously, right? It's you are looking at the presentation as a whole, not necessarily point by point. So you are providing a general score and you're also providing general rubric about that presentation. These advantages are that it doesn't communicate what to improve very specifically, and it is not good. Is not a good formative assessment. Okay. On the other hand, the analytic rubric, the advantages are that each criterion is evaluated separately. So for that reason, you can provide very specific feedback, and and it's an efficient formative assessment because you can provide that very specific feedback to students as well. The disadvantages are that it takes more time to evaluate using an analytic rubric, right? Because you are scoring multiple items. So it takes a little more time to do so. But both of them are valuable and both of them are handy depending on the type of assessment that you are evaluating. Okay, so on that, you will need to make a decision depending on, again, on the assessment. All right. So now let's think, because I don't think you're able to chat with one another right now. Let's take a minute or two to think about what are the elements of an effective assessment rubric. Think of two elements of an effective assessment rubric. All right. Go ahead and put them on the chat. Two elements of an effective assessment rubric. All right. I see that it helps us align our objectives to the ability of the students at a specific performance level. That it has to be, it communicates a clear criteria to students to know what the expectation is for the particular assessment. Okay. It takes into consideration the non-negotiables. It encourages students to take risk, but at the same time, it helps us identify that we are assessing for language performance. It provides students feedback to help them identify their strengths and their weaknesses. Very good. It provides clear criteria. Mhm. Anything else? It uses simple language. Perfect. Something that the students can understand. Mhm. Moving on. So we see the value of using rubrics, right? Most importantly is that it's a very good feedback tool that we can utilize to help students grow in their language proficiency. So moving on with step 4. Step 4, describe the performance that exceeds your expectations and performance that does not meet your expectations. So we're going from one end of the rubric to the other end, right? So we're going to be describing both ends. The best and easiest way to create a rubric when you work on exceeds expectations and does not meet expectations, whatever you can um, go between the two of them, that will be your meets expectations. So, well designed rubrics show students the characteristics of the language performance that meet the proficiency target. Okay. We, in order to help students improve their performance, the rubric needs to describe the characteristics of does not meet expectations and exceeds expectations. Once we have those two ready to go and students are able to see when they're not going to be meeting expectations because they're going to be focusing on that, most of them, not all of them, right? A few are going to be going for the max points, right? For the exceeds expectations. But most of our students probably going to say, okay, what's the minimum work I can do and still pass? Well, there it is. You put it up in plain words and say, okay, if you want to pass this assessment, this is what I want you to be able to do, right? This is meets expectations. But if you fail to do this, then this is what you're gonna where you're gonna end up. And remember, even when they don't meet expectations, they do still get credit. Okay, just by completing the task, they should be able to do credit. Now, if they don't do any work, that's a totally different story. They didn't try, then I would say that's a zero. I know that there is a proposal going out in some districts where they said even if they don't do any work, they should be able to get a percentage. And I believe the percentage is 59%, if I'm not mistaken. Some teachers are very against that idea, and I can see why. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the semester, if we're giving 59% all the way through, well, guess what? That student is going to make it with a D, right? If he or she just turns in one or two assignments, voila, that's it. They might be able to make it with a D with very minimal effort and very minimal work. So I can see why some teachers are very against that idea. You are going to have to check on the district's policy where you're working at, but also you're going to have to make a decision because at the end of the day, it's your classroom, right? And what you say is gonna go most of the time. So In my very own opinion, I said, if you tried, you show me that you tried, you will get points. But if you do not turn in any work or you didn't even try, then you will get no points. As simple as that, right? Remember, we want to encourage our students to continue learning and being motivated to continue learning the target language.